I was 67 years old when I discovered that a mother could be disposable. After selling everything I owned to buy my daughter a house, my wedding rings, my late husband's watches, even my grandmother's silver, I expected gratitude. Instead, I was shown to the service room near the laundry while my ex-son-in-law's entire family moved in. Just temporary, my daughter said, not meeting my eyes. What they didn't know was that the house was still in my name. I watched silently as they claimed bedrooms, ordered new furniture, and planned renovations, all while treating me like an unwelcome ghost. They excluded me from my own daughter's birthday party, whispered about me when they thought I couldn't hear, and rifled through my few remaining possessions without permission. But sometimes, the quietest women hide the most surprising strengths. Follow my journey as I reveal what happens when a lifetime of kindness is mistaken for weakness, and a mother who has nothing left to lose finally decides to stand up for herself. This is a story about betrayal, dignity, and the unexpected power of a woman who was underestimated one too many times. Follow our channel for more heart-wrenching true stories. Like and comment where you're watching from. I was 67 years old when I discovered that a mother could be disposable. I remember that day with a clarity that still burns. I was standing on the porch of my tiny rented apartment, folding a blanket that still smelled like hospital disinfectant. It was the last item to pack. The moving boxes were already stacked in the freight truck, and the impatient driver was calling my name for the third time. I looked up at the Montana sky, overcast and muggy, and thought to myself, a new chapter begins. I believed I was going to live with my daughter, but what I didn't know was that I was actually being invited to my own emotional funeral. The phone call from Emily came late that afternoon. Her voice was tense, almost rehearsed. "Mom, just to let you know, tomorrow when you arrive, Mark's parents will be there. They lost their house and, well, also his uncle's, his brother who just got out of rehab anyway. We're going to try to live like one big family, right?" My hand trembled holding the phone, but my voice, sweeter than ever. "Of course, dear. It's your apartment, your fresh start. It'll be wonderful," she responded with relief. "Thanks for understanding. You'll be staying in the service room, okay? Just for a little while." She hung up without saying, "I love you." I stood frozen. The blanket fell from my hands, but I smiled, for the first time in weeks, because in that moment, I knew my plan would have to begin. You see, 6 months earlier, I sold everything I owned, my wedding rings, my late husband's watch collection, even my grandmother's silver, to buy that house. I did it because Emily had just divorced, was struggling with debt, and had a 5-year-old daughter who needed stability. I signed the papers secretly, planning to surprise her with the deed on her birthday. A fresh start. A gift from a mother who'd worked 60-hour weeks as a nurse her entire life to give her daughter everything. "Mom, we found this perfect house," she'd told me over coffee 3 months ago, her eyes shining with hope for the first time since the divorce. "But the down payment is impossible." That night I called my bank and emptied my retirement account. I paid cash. I hired the contractors. I even planted rose bushes by the front door, because Emily always said a home needed roses to feel like home. And now I was being relegated to the service room, a glorified closet with a tiny window, while complete strangers, her ex-husband's family who'd never bothered to remember my name at family gatherings, would be taking over the bedrooms. The master bedroom that I'd specifically asked the painter to color in Emily's favorite shade of blue. The driver honked again. "Ma'am, we need to get going if we want to make it before dark." I picked up the blanket, folded it with precision, and placed it in my purse. The kind of precision you learn when you've spent 40 years measuring medication dosages, where a millimeter's mistake could mean someone's life. "I'm coming," I called back, my voice steady now. That night I stayed at a roadside motel just outside of Bozeman. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my purse. Inside was a small envelope I hadn't looked at in weeks. The property deed, with my name on it. Not Emily's. I had planned to sign it over to her as a surprise, a gift of love without strings. But as I stared at my name on that paper, something shifted inside me. A lifetime of bending, giving, sacrificing. And for what? To be an afterthought. to be stuffed away in a service room while strangers occupied the home I'd purchased with my life's savings. For the first time in my 67 years, I felt a new emotion blooming. Not anger, not even disappointment, but a calm, clear resolve. I carefully folded the deed and put it back in my purse. Tomorrow, I whispered to myself in the dark motel room. Tomorrow they'll all find out what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I slept soundly that night, and I dreamt of the look on my daughter's face when she would arrive at the house with her new family and discover what I had waiting for her. Sometimes the quietest women hide the most surprising strengths. And as I drifted to sleep, I smiled again because Emily had forgotten the most important lesson I ever taught her. Never underestimate a mother who has nothing left to lose. The next morning, I arrived before anyone else. I'd driven through a pink Montana sunrise, rehearsing what I would say, how I would act. The house stood silently waiting, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and a garden that would bloom beautifully come spring. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the key I had paid for, into the front door. Inside, everything gleamed. Empty rooms with freshly polished hardwood floors, windows that let in streams of golden light, the scent of new paint and possibility. I walked slowly through each room, my fingers trailing along walls that I had chosen the colors for. Soft sage in the living room, buttery yellow in the kitchen, that special blue in what was supposed to be Emily's bedroom. This could have been so different, I whispered to no one. I made my way to the small service room near the laundry. It was barely 10 feet by 8, with a single narrow window overlooking the neighbor's fence. This was to be my space, my reward for a lifetime of sacrifice. I set down my single suitcase and smoothed the thin mattress that had been hastily placed on a metal frame. Around noon, they began to arrive. First came Mark's parents, the Hendersons. I'd met them only a handful of times during Emily's marriage, and each time, Mrs. Henderson had looked at me as if I were something stuck to the bottom of her designer shoes. Now she dragged in multiple suitcases, her husband trailing behind carrying golf clubs. "Oh, you're already here," she said, not bothering to hide her disappointment when she saw me standing in the hallway. "Yes, I am," I replied, my voice as neutral as hospital sheets. Henderson barely nodded in my direction before asking loudly, "Which room is ours, then?" Before I could answer, the front door banged open again. This time it was Mark's Uncle Russell and his wife Patty. Russell's face was red from the effort of carrying their luggage, and Patty immediately began complaining about the drive. Neither acknowledged me as they pushed past, their heavy perfume lingering in the air long after they'd disappeared upstairs. Last came Mark's brother, Jeffrey, the one who just completed rehab. He had the same chiseled jaw as Mark, but his eyes were vacant, his movements jittery. He carried only a backpack and gave me a quick, almost embarrassed smile before following the others. I stood in the entryway, invisible. The sounds of their voices, claiming rooms, moving furniture, laughing, echoed throughout what should have been my gift to my daughter. My hands curled into fists at my sides, then relaxed. Patience had always been my virtue. It would serve me now. Emily arrived last, around 2 o'clock. She was carrying a garish artificial bouquet and wearing a strained smile. The sight of her, my only child, the baby I had nursed through pneumonia, the teenager I had worked double shifts to send to college, made my heart contract painfully in my chest. "Mom," she said, giving me a quick, perfunctory hug. The kind you might give a distant relative or a colleague you don't particularly like. "You found the place okay?" "I did," I replied, noticing how she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "It's a beautiful home." She nodded distractedly, already looking past me toward the sounds coming from upstairs. "Listen, we're going to put your mattress in the service room, okay? It's just temporary, I promise. Once everyone gets settled." Her voice trailed off, the empty promise hanging between us. I had heard such promises before. They were the loose change of the thoughtless, easy to dispense, and worth very little. "Of course, dear," I said. "Whatever works best for everyone." Relief flooded her face. She squeezed my arm before hurrying upstairs to join the others, leaving me standing alone in the entryway, beside the rose bushes I had planted for her. That evening they gathered in the kitchen, my kitchen, with the buttery yellow walls and the granite countertops I had chosen. Someone had ordered pizza, and the boxes were strewn across the island. Mrs. Henderson was pouring wine into plastic cups, while Jeffrey told a loud story about someone he'd met in rehab. No one had thought to invite me. I sat on the edge of my thin mattress in the service room listening to their laughter. The walls were thin enough that I could hear Mr. Henderson complaining about his golf game and Patty gossiping about a neighbor back home. I unwrapped a granola bar from my purse. No one had thought to ask if I had eaten dinner, and chewed it slowly. Later, when the house had quieted, I heard footsteps outside my door. I recognized Emily's tread, lighter on the left foot because of an old dance injury. She paused, and for a moment I thought she might knock, might come in to check on her mother, to say goodnight, perhaps, or to apologize for the day's indignities. But after a moment, the footsteps continued down the hall. I pulled my hospital blanket up to my chin and stared at the ceiling. In the dim light filtering through the narrow window, I noticed something, a small crack running across the plaster, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Like the fracture in my heart, it was hidden but undeniably present. And as I drifted toward sleep, I couldn't help but notice something else about Emily. Something in her voice when she spoke to Mark's family. Something in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. She was hiding something beyond this bizarre living arrangement. And whatever it was, I had a feeling it would explain everything. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would begin to uncover the truth. And then, only then, would I reveal mine. The following morning, I woke to the sound of car doors slamming. Pressing my face against the small window of my service room, I watched as they all piled into two vehicles. Emily, the Hendersons, Russell and Patty, and even Jeffrey. No one had thought to tell me they were going out, let alone invite me. I watched as they backed out of the driveway, their animated conversations visible through the car windows, though I couldn't hear the words. The house fell into a blessed silence. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands folded in my lap, savoring the moment. Then, with a deep breath, I stood up. It was time. I walked through the house slowly, taking in the evidence of their occupation. Coffee mugs left unwashed in the sink, a jacket thrown carelessly over a chair, shoes scattered in the entryway. In just one day, they had marked their territory, claimed this space as theirs. My fingertips traced the countertop I had selected, the drawer pulls I had chosen after hours at the hardware store. Not yet, I whispered to myself. Not yet. I made my way to the second floor, pausing at Emily's bedroom door. It was slightly ajar. I hesitated only briefly before pushing it open. The room was in disarray, clothes strewn across the unmade bed, makeup scattered on the dresser. I had refinished myself as a housewarming gift. On the nightstand sat a framed photo of Emily and her daughter, Lily, my granddaughter who was currently staying with her father during this transition period. Next to the photo lay Emily's phone charger, her reading glasses, and, I froze, a prescription bottle. I picked it up carefully. Anxiety medication, prescribed just 2 weeks ago. My nurse's training kicked in as I noted the dosage, the frequency. It was strong. Stronger than I would have expected for someone like Emily, who had always prided herself on handling stress without help. What was happening in my daughter's life that required such pharmaceutical intervention? What wasn't she telling me? I carefully replaced the bottle exactly as I had found it and continued my exploration of the house. The master bedroom had been claimed by the Hendersons, their expensive luggage open on the cedar chest I had saved for months to purchase. Mrs. Henderson's perfumes and creams lined the bathroom counter, claiming the space with their ornate bottles and designer labels. The guest bedroom held Russell and Patty, their presence announced by the lingering scent of Patty's overpowering perfume and Russell's golf magazines scattered on the floor. And the small third bedroom, meant for Lily when she visited, had been given to Jeffrey, his few possessions making the room feel somehow emptier rather than occupied. But it wasn't these rooms I was interested in. With careful steps, I made my way to the end of the hallway, where a small, almost invisible cord hung from the ceiling. I pulled it and a trap door opened, revealing a fold-down ladder to the attic. The architect had been confused when I'd insisted on this feature. Most modern homes in Montana didn't bother with attics anymore, but I had grown up in a house with hidden spaces, with secrets tucked away in corners, and somehow I had known I would need this one day. The ladder creaked slightly as I climbed. The attic was warm, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light that filtered through the small ventilation windows. It was empty, except for a few boxes of Christmas decorations I had purchased, imagining holiday celebrations in this house, celebrations that now seemed unlikely to include me. I moved to the far corner, where the roofline sloped down to meet the floor. There, behind a loose panel I had instructed the builders to leave, was a small alcove, and in that alcove sat a fireproof safe, its gray metal dull in the dim light. My fingers trembled slightly as I input the combination, Emily's birthday, and the safe opened with a soft click. Inside lay several documents: my will, my medical directives, a small box containing my wedding ring, and my late husband's pocket watch. And there, on top, lay a manila envelope containing the property deed to the house. I took it out, hands steady now. Opening it carefully, I confirmed what I already knew. The house was in my name, completely legally mine. I had never transferred ownership to Emily as I had planned to do. The surprise gift had remained in my name because I hadn't yet had the chance to make it official, to present it to her with a bow and a speech about new beginnings. Now I was grateful for that delay. I returned everything to the safe, closed it, and replaced the loose panel. As I descended the ladder and closed the attic door, a sense of calm settled over me. Not happiness, no, that emotion seemed far away now, but a certain steadiness, a readiness. I had just reached the bottom of the stairs when I heard cars pulling into the driveway. Quickly, I returned to my service room, sat on the bed, and picked up a book I had been pretending to read. They burst through the front door like conquering heroes, arms laden with shopping bags. I could hear them in the entryway, excited voices overlapping. "The leather sectional will look perfect in the living room. Did you see those dining chairs? So much better than these old things. We need to measure for the new curtains. These are so outdated." Outdated. The curtains I had selected just months ago, after weeks of comparing samples. I remained in my room, invisible, as they continued their excited planning for their home. Through the thin walls, I could hear them discussing where each new piece would go, what colors would replace the ones I had chosen, how they would transform the space to suit their tastes. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set, there was a knock at my door. Emily stood there, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Mom, we're ordering Chinese for dinner. Do you want anything?" Such a small kindness, yet in that moment it felt enormous. "Yes, thank you. Chicken and broccoli would be nice." My voice was steady, giving away nothing of what I discovered, of what I knew. She nodded, already turning away. "Oh, and Mom, Aunt Patty mentioned that you were upstairs earlier when we were out." My heart skipped a beat, but my face remained placid. "Just exploring my new home, dear." Something flickered across her face. Guilt, perhaps, or uncertainty. But then she nodded again and was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my secret. That night, as I ate my Chinese food alone in my room, no one had suggested I join them at the table, I heard Emily's aunt make a cutting remark through the thin wall. "The old lady seems to be always snooping around. She doesn't have a penny to her name, but she wants to act like she owns the place." And then, the sound that broke something fundamental inside me, Emily's laugh, a laugh of agreement, a laugh that said she was one of them now, not mine. And in that moment, as my heart cracked into invisible pieces, I made my decision. It was time for the truth to come out. All of it. Days passed in a strange rhythm of avoidance and tension. I became a ghost in my own house, moving silently through corridors that should have welcomed me. Each morning, I would wake before anyone else, make a cup of tea in the kitchen, and retreat to my tiny room before the others stirred. The routine became my armor, invisible but protective. On the fourth day, As I was washing my teacup in the kitchen sink, Jeffrey stumbled in, his eyes bloodshot, his movements unsteady. It was barely 9 in the morning. "Oh," he said, startled to find me there. "It's you." I nodded, continuing to wash my cup with deliberate care. "You know," he said, leaning against the counter too casually, "this is a really nice house. Emily got lucky, really lucky." His words slurred slightly at the edges. "Yes," I replied, my voice neutral. "She did." He reached past me to open the refrigerator, the smell of alcohol seeping from his pores. "Must be nice having a daughter who lets you stay here. Charity case and all that." The cup nearly slipped from my hands. I set it down carefully in the drying rack, turned to face him. "I'm her mother," I said simply. Jeffrey laughed, a harsh sound that filled the quiet kitchen. "Yeah, well, mothers are replaceable. Trust me, I know." He grabbed a carton of orange juice, drank straight from it and shuffled out, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen, hands dripping wet, heart hammering. That afternoon, I discovered that someone had been in my room. My few possessions had been moved ever so slightly. The book on my nightstand was at a different angle. My sweater folded differently than I had left it. The invasion felt like a physical blow. Not even this tiny space was mine alone. Later, I overheard Mrs. Henderson talking to Emily in the hallway. "Darling, I was looking for some aspirin and checked the medicine cabinet in your mother's bathroom. I hope you don't mind, but I borrowed her shampoo. Mine is simply too expensive to share." Emily's response was immediate, accommodating. "Of course, Judith, whatever you need. I'm sure Mom doesn't mind." But I did mind. I minded deeply, not because of the shampoo itself, a cheap drugstore brand I'd bought on clearance, but because of the assumption, the entitlement, the complete disregard for boundaries. That evening, as I was returning from a short walk around the neighborhood, my daily escape from the tension of the house, I found Patty in my room, rifling through my handbag. "What are you doing?" My voice was sharper than I'd intended, the accumulated frustrations of days finally breaking through my careful composure. Patty jumped, her hand jerking out of my purse. "Oh, I was just looking for some blood pressure medication. Russell forgot his, and I thought, well, you're old, so you assumed I would have some," I finished for her, "and that it would be appropriate to go through my personal belongings without asking." Her face flushed with indignation rather than shame. "Well, I didn't think you'd mind. It's not like you have anything valuable anyway." The insult landed like a slap. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "Please leave my room." She huffed past me, muttering something about ungrateful and "after all we've done." I closed the door behind her, leaned against it, and took several deep breaths. My hands were shaking. That night something strange happened. A heavy rainstorm moved through the area, wind lashing against the windows. Around midnight, I was awakened by shouts and commotion. Wrapping my robe around me, I ventured into the hallway to find everyone gathered outside the master bathroom, water pooling on the hardwood floor. "The ceiling's leaking!" Mrs. Henderson was almost hysterical, her silk pajamas splattered with water. "It's ruining everything!" Emily was trying to calm her while Mr. Henderson held a bucket under the steady drip coming from a crack in the ceiling, directly above their bathroom and nowhere else in the house. "I'll call a plumber first thing in the morning," Emily promised, her voice strained. "And where are we supposed to sleep tonight?" Mrs. Henderson demanded. "Everything's soaked." Jeffrey, standing in the doorway with the others, caught my eye and smirked. Maybe Grandma would be willing to give up her luxury suite for the night. All eyes turned to me. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, though I knew it was petty. The house was responding to the invasion, it seemed, fighting back in its own way. "Of course," I said, my voice mild. "I'd be happy to sleep on the couch." The next morning, the leak had mysteriously stopped. The plumber Emily called found nothing wrong with the pipes, no explanation for the sudden deluge that had soaked only the Hendersons' bathroom. He scratched his head, charged for the visit anyway, and left. "Strange," he'd said, gathering his tools. Almost like the house itself was crying. I had thought the same thing, though I kept the observation to myself. That afternoon, as everyone was distracted by the delivery of their new leather sectional, ordered to replace my carefully chosen sofa, I slipped upstairs to Emily's room. The prescription bottle still sat on her nightstand. But now it was joined by something else, a pamphlet from a fertility clinic in Bozeman. My heart stuttered. Emily had never mentioned wanting another child. After Lily, she had been adamant about being one and done, especially given the difficulties in her marriage to Mark. What had changed? I picked up the pamphlet, flipped through it quickly. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. Test results, it seemed, though the medical terminology was different from what I was familiar with as a nurse. But one word stood out clearly. Positive. Emily was pregnant? My mind raced. She was divorced. She hadn't mentioned dating anyone new, unless... The sound of footsteps on the stairs sent me hurrying back to my room, the new information churning in my mind. I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, connecting dots that had been scattered before me. The sudden reconciliation with Mark's family, the anxiety medication, the strange, almost secretive behavior, the way she sometimes touched her abdomen absently when she thought no one was looking. Emily and Mark, they must be back together. Or at least, there must have been a reconciliation of sorts, enough for a child. But why the secrecy? Why this elaborate charade of playing happy extended family? And why shut me out? Her own mother, while welcoming his entire family into a home that was, in fact, mine. As I sat there piecing together this puzzle, the house alarm suddenly began blaring. The piercing sound filled every room, inescapable and insistent. I covered my ears, making my way to the hallway where everyone had gathered in confusion. "What's happening?" Patty yelled over the noise. Emily was frantically trying to enter the code on the alarm panel. "I don't know, it just went off by itself." For almost 10 minutes, the alarm continued its assault on our ears, until finally, Emily managed to silence it. No one had tripped it. No doors or windows had been opened. Like the mysterious leak, the house seemed to be protesting in its own way. As everyone dispersed, grumbling about the disruption, I caught Emily looking at me strangely, suspiciously, as if she somehow sensed that I was putting the pieces together, as if she feared what would happen when I did. That night, I lay awake in my small bed, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and sighs of the house settling. "We're alike, you and I whispered to the walls. "Both of us purchased, but not valued. Both of us housing people who don't appreciate what they've been given." Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would check the trash, see if there was any more evidence of what Emily was hiding, and then I would decide when and how to reveal my own secret. That the house they were so casually claiming, redecorating, invading, had never been Emily's to give. The next day was Emily's birthday. I had almost forgotten, lost as I was in the fog of my new reality. But as I walked past the dining room that morning, I noticed Mrs. Henderson arranging flowers in a vase, expensive lilies and orchids that filled the room with their heady scent. "These are lovely," I said, pausing in the doorway. Mrs. Henderson barely glanced up. "For Emily's birthday dinner tonight. We're having a little celebration." She adjusted a stem with manicured fingers. Nothing fancy, just family. The emphasis on the last word hung in the air between us. Family, a category from which I had been deliberately excluded. "I see," I said quietly. "What time should I be ready?" Her hands stilled. She looked up at me, her expression a careful mask of polite surprise. "Oh, I didn't realize. That is, we thought you might prefer your privacy. It's going to be quite lively, you know, and at your age..." My age. As if my 67 years made me incapable of celebrating my own daughter's birthday. "I'm sure I can manage," I said, my voice steady, despite the familiar ache blooming in my chest. "After all, I've been attending Emily's birthdays for quite some time now." Mrs. Henderson's smile tightened. "Of course. Well, we'll be gathering around 7. Nothing formal." I nodded and continued to the kitchen where I made my solitary cup of tea. As I stirred in a teaspoon of honey, I found myself wondering what gift I could give Emily. In previous years, I had always planned months in advance, saving for special presents, wrapping them with care, writing heartfelt cards. This year, trapped in this strange limbo, I had nothing to offer except my presence, a gift that it seemed no one particularly wanted. Later that afternoon, while everyone was busy with party preparations, I slipped outside to the small garden behind the house. The rose bushes I had planted were still in their infancy, just beginning to take root. I carefully cut one of the few blooms, a pale pink rose with petals that unfurled like a secret, and brought it inside. In my room, I found a small scrap of paper and a pen. I hesitated, unsure what to write. What could I possibly say to this daughter who had relegated me to the margins of her life? In the end, I simply wrote, "Happy birthday. All my love, Mom." I placed the note and the rose on my bed while I searched for something to use as a vase. When I returned, both were gone. I found the rose later, discarded in the kitchen trash beneath vegetable peelings and coffee grounds. The note was nowhere to be seen. That evening, as the clock approached 7, I changed into the nicest outfit I had brought with me, a simple blue dress that Emily had once complimented, years ago when such things still mattered between us. I applied a touch of lipstick, a whisper of perfume, small armor against the night ahead. The house had transformed in my absence. Twinkling lights hung from the living room ceiling. Music played from hidden speakers. The dining table gleamed with candles and unfamiliar dishes, clearly new purchases to replace the serviceable set I had included with the house. Guests began to arrive, not just the household members, but others I didn't recognize. Colleagues of Emily's, I presumed, and friends of the Hendersons. They filled the house with laughter and conversation, swirling around me like water around a stone. No one introduced me. No one sought me out. I stood in corners, moved when someone needed the space I occupied, accepted a glass of wine that I didn't drink. I was less than a ghost. At least ghosts inspired fear or wonder. I inspired nothing but mild inconvenience. Around 8, a collective hush fell over the gathering. I turned to see what had caused it and felt my heart stop. Mark was standing in the doorway, Emily's ex-husband, Lily's father, the man whose family had so thoroughly colonized this house. He stood there in an expensive suit, a gift in his hands, looking as confident and handsome as the day Emily had first brought him home to meet me nearly a decade ago. "Sorry I'm late," he announced to the room. Traffic was a nightmare. No one seemed surprised by his arrival. In fact, Mrs. Henderson, his mother, rushed forward to embrace him, taking the gift and ushering him into the center of the gathering where Emily stood, radiant in a red dress I had never seen before. They embraced. Not the awkward hug of divorced co-parents, but the intimate embrace of lovers. His hand lingered at the small of her back. Her fingers brushed his cheek. The room erupted in cheers and knowing smiles. I felt dizzy. The pieces that had been slowly assembling in my mind clicked into their final positions. This wasn't just about the house. This wasn't just about relegating me to a service room. This was about a reconciliation, a reunion, one that, for some reason, Emily had hidden from me while sharing it with everyone else. I made my way to a chair in the corner, sat down heavily. From this vantage point, I could observe the party without participating in it. I watched as Emily and Mark moved through the crowd together, accepting congratulations. For what? Their reunion. The baby I suspected was growing inside my daughter. The beautiful home they had claimed as their fresh start. The irony burned like acid in my throat. As the evening progressed, more gifts were presented. Emily opened each one with exclamations of delight. A cashmere sweater from the Hendersons, expensive wine from Russell and Patty, a spa gift certificate from her colleagues. The pile grew, a monument to how loved and valued she was by everyone, except apparently her own mother. When the time came for cake, everyone gathered around the dining table. I remained in my corner, forgotten. Emily stood at the head of the table, Mark's arm around her waist, as Mrs. Henderson brought out an elaborate 3-tiered creation, studded with fresh berries and glittering candles. "Before we sing," Mark announced, raising his glass, "I have an announcement to make." The room fell silent, anticipatory. Emily looked up at him, her face glowing with a happiness I hadn't seen in years. As many of you know, Emily and I have been working on our relationship these past few months. It hasn't been easy, but some things are worth fighting for. He smiled down at her, then looked around the room. And tonight, on her birthday, in this beautiful new home, I'm thrilled to announce that we're not just back together. We're expecting. Gasps and cheers erupted. Mrs. Henderson wiped away tears. Patty squealed with delight. Emily's colleagues rushed forward with congratulations. In my corner, I remained perfectly still, invisible. My suspicions confirmed. I felt no vindication, only a profound sense of betrayal. Not because Emily was pregnant, not because she had reconciled with Mark, but because she had excluded me, only me, from every part of this new chapter in her life. As the celebration continued, I slipped away unnoticed, retreating to my small room. Through the thin walls, I could hear the party in full swing. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses in toast after toast. I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing my blue dress, and allowed a single tear to track down my cheek. On the nightstand beside me sat the cold soup someone had eventually remembered to bring me, hours after everyone else had enjoyed the catered dinner. I hadn't touched it. Near midnight, the party finally began to wind down. I heard goodbyes being called, car doors slamming, and the household members making their way to their respective rooms. And then, something unexpected. Voices coming from Emily's room, just down the hall. Her voice and Mark's. He was staying. Of course he was staying. This had been the plan all along. The entire family reunited under one roof. My roof. I pressed my ear against the wall, straining to hear their conversation. Emily's voice was soft, happy. Mark's deeper tones responded with equal warmth. They were discussing the party, the gifts, the reactions to their news. And then, clear as crystal through the thin wall, "When are you going to tell your mom about the baby?" Mark asked. A pause. Then Emily's reply, "I don't know. She's been so strange lately. Distant. I'm not sure she'll even care." The words hit me like physical blows. Strange. Distant. Wouldn't care about her own grandchild. I stepped back from the wall, my hands trembling. In Emily's eyes, I had become the villain of this story. The cold, uncaring mother who wouldn't celebrate her happiness. How completely she had rewritten our history, casting herself as the neglected daughter rather than the architect of my exclusion. I sat at the small desk in the corner of my room, pulled out a piece of paper, and began to write. The house deed would speak for itself, but there were other truths that needed to be told. By morning, everyone would know exactly who owned the beautiful house they had so casually claimed as their own. By morning, the masks would fall away. I barely slept that night. The words I had written burned in my mind as I lay in the darkness, listening to the occasional creak of the house settling around me. By the time dawn filtered through my narrow window, I had made peace with what I was about to do. Sometimes the kindest thing a mother can offer is truth, even when that truth feels like a blade. I rose early, as had become my habit. The house was quiet, everyone still sleeping off the celebration of the previous night. In the kitchen, I made a pot of coffee, not just my usual single cup, but enough for everyone. A final gesture of hospitality in a home that was, despite everything, mine. From my robe pocket, I withdrew the envelope containing the deed and the letter I had written. I placed it on the kitchen island, where it would be impossible to miss. Then I returned to my room to dress, selecting clothes with care, not for their appearance, but for the dignity they offered. A simple blouse, neat slacks, my single pair of good shoes, armor for the battle ahead. Around 9, I heard the first stirrings of life. The shower running upstairs, footsteps in the hallway, a door opening and closing. I remained in my room, seated on the edge of the bed, hands folded in my lap waiting. The scream, when it came, was sudden and sharp, a sound of genuine shock. Emily's voice. She had found the envelope. I took a deep breath and opened my door. In the kitchen, I found a tableau frozen in surprise. Emily standing at the island, the deed and letter in her hands, her face drained of color. Mark beside her, reading over her shoulder, his expression darkening. The Hendersons had just entered the room, still in their robes, drawn by Emily's cry. "Mom?" Emily's voice wavered between disbelief and anger. "What is this?" I stepped fully into the room, my back straight, chin lifted. It's exactly what it appears to be. The property deed for this house. In my name. Mrs. Henderson pushed forward, snatching the paper from Emily's limp fingers. This can't be right. The house is Emily's. She told you what she believed to be true, I said, my voice steady, despite the hammering of my heart, or what she wanted to be true. But as you can see, the house is in my name. It always has been. The room erupted in voices, accusations, questions, demands. I stood in the center of the storm, unmoving. Mark's face had flushed a dangerous red. His father was already on his phone, presumably calling a lawyer. Patty and Russell appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion, with Jeffrey peering blearily over their shoulders. You lied to us, Emily finally said, her voice cutting through the chaos. You let us think. I lied? The question escaped me in a whisper of disbelief. I bought this house, Emily. I emptied my retirement account. I sold your father's watches, my mother's silver, my wedding rings. Everything I had of value went into this house. Her eyes widened. But you said it was a gift. You said it was going to be a gift, I acknowledged, feeling suddenly tired beyond words. I was planning to transfer the deed to you on your birthday, a fresh start after your divorce. But then what? Mark demanded, stepping forward. I looked directly at my daughter, ignoring everyone else in the room. Then you called me to say that I would be staying in the service room, that your ex-husband's entire family would be living here, that I was an afterthought in a house I had purchased with everything I owned. Silence fell, heavy and uncomfortable. Emily's gaze dropped to the floor, and then, I continued, my voice gaining strength, I arrived to find myself treated as an unwelcome guest, excluded from conversations, uninvited to my own daughter's birthday celebration. My belongings rifled through, my presence barely tolerated. Mrs. Henderson recovered first, her voice sharp with indignation. So this is what? Some kind of revenge? Some twisted power play? I turned to her, meeting her gaze steadily. This is ownership, Mrs. Henderson, of a property, of a truth, of my own dignity. I'll sue, Mark announced, his lawyer's instincts surfacing. This is fraud, misrepresentation. You can't just... I can, I interrupted calmly. The house is legally mine. I have never claimed otherwise on any document. I made no false statements, signed no fraudulent papers. I simply allowed my daughter to believe what she wanted to believe, that the house I purchased with my life savings was a gift already given, rather than one still in the offering. Emily had begun to cry, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. Why are you doing this, Mom? Why now? Is it because of the baby? Because Mark and I are back together? The question caught me off guard. The baby? You think this is about your pregnancy? Isn't it? She countered. You've been acting strange ever since you found out. I stared at her, genuinely bewildered. Emily, you never told me about the baby. I found out last night when Mark announced it to a room full of people. A room I was barely tolerated in, eating cold soup in the corner while everyone celebrated. Her tears stopped abruptly. What? No one told me you and Mark were back together. No one told me you were expecting. I pieced it together from things I overheard, from the fertility clinic pamphlet in your room, from watching you at the party. I shook my head, a lifetime of hurt crystallizing in that moment. You excluded me from every part of your life that mattered, and then you had the audacity to call me distant. Confusion flickered across Emily's face. But I assumed Mom knew. Mark's Uncle Russell stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. We're not leaving. You can't just throw us out. Actually, I said, turning to face him, I can, and I am. I want everyone out of my house by the end of the day. The room exploded again, protests, threats, pleas. Jeffrey announced he was calling the police. Patty began sobbing dramatically. Mr. Henderson threatened lawsuits, his voice rising to a shout. Through it all, I remained calm, a still point in the center of the chaos I had created. Not because I felt triumphant or vindicated, but because for the first time in months, perhaps years, I was standing in my truth. No more bending, no more accommodating, no more invisible sacrifices for people who wouldn't even see them. Mom, Emily finally said, her voice cutting through the noise. Can we talk? Alone? I nodded, following her to the back porch. The morning sun was bright, casting long shadows across the garden where my young rose bushes struggled to take root in unfamiliar soil. I didn't know, she said as soon as the door closed behind us, about the house. I thought it was a gift from my inheritance from Dad. You thought I had nothing left to give, I finished for her. That I was just a burden to be accommodated in the smallest possible space. Her face crumpled. It wasn't like that. I was trying to help Mark's family. They lost everything in that investment scam, and I thought I was being generous. With my house. With my house, I corrected gently. And what about me, Emily? Where was your generosity when it came to your own mother? She had no answer for that. We stood in silence, the gulf between us wider than the physical space we occupied. What happens now? She finally asked, her voice small. I looked out at the garden, at the life I had tried to plant here. Now everyone leaves, including you and Mark. This house is mine, and I intend to live in it. Alone. Mom, please. I'm tired, Emily, I said, feeling the weight of every one of my 67 years. Tired of being taken for granted, tired of being invisible, tired of giving everything I have and receiving nothing in return. It's time for me to take care of myself for once. She started to protest, but something in my expression stopped her. Perhaps she finally saw me, really saw me, for the first time in years, not as an obligation, not as a convenience, but as a woman who had reached her breaking point. We'll be gone by sunset, she said quietly, and turned to go back inside. I remained on the porch, listening as the news spread through the house, doors slamming, voices raised in protest, the sound of suitcases being dragged from closets, the dismantling of a life that had never truly belonged to any of them. And as I stood there, watching the sun climb higher in the Montana sky, I felt something unexpected bloom in my chest. Not happiness, not quite, but something adjacent to it, something that felt, after so long, like the first tender shoot of self-respect. The exodus began almost immediately. Like ants fleeing a flooded nest, they scurried throughout the house, gathering belongings, making frantic phone calls, casting accusatory glances my way whenever our paths crossed. I remained largely in the background, an observer to the dismantling of their brief occupation. Mrs. Henderson was the most vocal, her voice carrying through the house as she berated Emily in the upstairs hallway. How could you not have checked the deed? For God's sake, Emily, you're a paralegal. This is basic due diligence. Emily's response was too quiet to hear, but the defeat in her posture was visible, even from where I stood at the bottom of the stairs. Her shoulders curved inward, her head bowed. For a fleeting moment, I saw her as she had been at 12. The same posture when she hadn't made the cheerleading squad, when I had held her while she cried against my shoulder. The memory sent a sharp pain through my chest, but I remained where I was, my decision firm despite the echoes of maternal instinct. By noon, the first of them departed. Russell and Patty left in a flurry of slammed doors and muttered accusations, their hastily packed suitcases thrown into their car with theatrical fury. Patty couldn't resist one final barb as she passed me in the entryway. I hope you're satisfied, tearing your own family apart like this. What kind of mother does such a thing? I met her gaze steadily. The kind who finally decides to mother herself. She had no response for that, just an indignant huff as she flounced out the door. Jeffrey was next, surprisingly sober as he dragged his backpack down the stairs. He paused when he saw me, something like respect flickering across his features. Didn't think you had it in you, old lady, he said, not unkindly. The quiet ones, right? I offered him a small nod. Take care of yourself, Jeffrey. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Yeah, you too. And then he was gone, the screen door swinging shut behind him. The Hendersons departed around 2 o'clock, their expensive luggage loaded into their luxury SUV by Mr. Henderson, while his wife sat in the passenger seat, ostentatiously refusing to look at the house, or me. Mr. Henderson paused before getting into the driver's seat, turning to where I stood on the porch. This isn't over, he said, his voice tight with restrained anger. Mark's talking to our lawyer. There could be claims against this property, depending on what Emily was promised. I simply nodded. neither agreeing nor disagreeing. The threat washed over me like water over stone. After what I had already endured, a legal challenge held little power to intimidate. As the afternoon wore on, the house grew quieter, emptier. The new furniture they had ordered, the leather sectional, the dining chairs, remained in the living room, orphaned by their departure. The flowers from Emily's birthday were beginning to wilt, petals dropping onto the polished wood of the dining table. Around 4, I heard Emily and Mark's voices from the upstairs bedroom, muffled at first, then rising in what was clearly an argument. "I can't believe you didn't check. This is on you, Emily." "Me? You're the lawyer, Mark. Why didn't you ask to see the paperwork?" "Because you told me it was yours, from your inheritance." Their voices faded as they moved further into the room, but the tenor of blame and recrimination remained. I went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and took it to the back porch, unwilling to eavesdrop on their disintegrating unity. The afternoon sun had warmed the wooden steps, and I sat there, cradling the mug between my palms, watching a pair of chickadees squabble over seeds in the bird feeder I had hung just days ago. The screen door creaked open behind me. I didn't turn, knowing who it would be. "Mom." Emily's voice was thick, as if she'd been crying. "We're almost ready to go." I nodded, still watching the birds. "All right." She hesitated, then sat beside me on the step, leaving a careful distance between us. Her hands twisted in her lap, the diamond of her engagement ring, back on her finger after their reconciliation, catching the sunlight. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Why didn't you just tell me? About the house? About how you were feeling?" I took a sip of tea, considering my response carefully. "Would you have listened, Emily? Really listened? Or would you have explained to me why I was wrong to feel the way I did? Why I needed to be more understanding, more accommodating?" She flinched slightly, and I knew my words had found their mark. "I would have tried," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "No," I said gently. "You would have managed me, the way you've been managing me for years now, making decisions about my life without consulting me, treating me like a responsibility rather than a person. That's not fair." But even as she protested, doubt shadowed her eyes. "Isn't it? You decided I would live in the service room. You decided I wouldn't be included in your birthday celebration. You decided I didn't need to know about your reconciliation with Mark or the baby." I set my mug down on the step beside me. "When was the last time you asked me what I wanted, Emily? What I thought? What I felt?" She had no answer for that. We sat in silence for several long moments. The distance between us measured not in inches, but in years of accumulated misunderstandings and unspoken resentments. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice small. I didn't see it." "I know, and I did know." Emily hadn't set out to hurt me, to diminish me. She had simply stopped seeing me as someone whose feelings and dignity mattered. It wasn't malice. It was a blind spot the size and shape of her mother. "What happens now?" she asked, echoing her question from earlier. I looked out at the garden, at the fledgling rose bushes that might, with care and time, flourish here. "Now you go. Start fresh somewhere else. Figure out your life with Mark. Prepare for your baby. And you?" A note of genuine concern had entered her voice. "You'll be here alone?" "Yes." The word held no sadness, no self-pity, just simple truth. "I'll be here, in my house, living my life. Will you?" She hesitated. "Will you let me visit? Bring Lily to see you? Let you be part of the new baby's life?" The question hung in the air between us, weighted with all that had happened, all that had been revealed. I turned to look at her, really look at her, my only child, the baby I had cradled through countless nights, the little girl who had once looked at me as if I hung the moon. "I don't know, Emily," I answered honestly. "That depends on whether you're visiting your mother or checking on an obligation." Her eyes filled with tears. "I do love you, Mom. I got so caught up in everything. Mark, his family, the pregnancy, trying to make everything perfect. Perfect for everyone except me," I said, not accusingly, but as a simple statement of fact. She nodded, accepting the truth of it. "I'll do better, if you give me a chance." I didn't answer immediately. Promises were easy. Change was hard. And trust, once broken, was the hardest of all to rebuild. But she was my daughter, and despite everything, I loved her with a fierceness that hadn't dimmed, even in the darkness of recent weeks. "We'll see," I said finally. Neither a rejection nor an embrace, but a door left slightly ajar. A possibility. She seemed to understand, nodding again before rising to her feet. "We'll be gone within the hour." I remained on the porch as she went back inside, listening to the final sounds of their departure. Footsteps on the stairs, the thud of suitcases, Mark's voice giving curt instructions. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the garden, when I finally heard the front door open. Rising from my seat, I made my way through the house to the entryway. Emily stood there, keys in hand, the keys to what she had thought was her house. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. Mark waited by the car, his expression unreadable from this distance. "The keys," she said, holding them out to me. I took them, our fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. "Thank you." She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the little girl she had been, the teenager, the young woman, all the Emilys I had loved throughout my life, layered beneath the stranger she had become. "I'll call you," she said, "when we're settled." I nodded, not making a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. "Goodbye, Emily." She hesitated as if wanting to say more, to embrace me, to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. But in the end, she simply turned and walked to the car, where Mark waited. I watched from the doorway as they drove away, their taillights receding in the gathering dusk. And then I was alone, truly alone for the first time in days. I closed the door, turned the lock, and leaned against it, feeling the solid wood at my back. The house was quiet, the air still vibrating with the echoes of raised voices and hasty departures. But beneath that, I sensed something else, a stillness that felt not like emptiness, but like possibility. I moved through the rooms slowly, touching surfaces, reacquainting myself with the space that was now, indisputably, mine. In the living room, I straightened a lampshade. In the kitchen, I wiped a smudge from the counter. Small gestures of reclamation, of ownership. That night, I moved my belongings from the service room to the master bedroom. I unpacked my clothes into the spacious closet, set my few toiletries on the marble vanity, turned down the covers of the king-sized bed. As I slipped between the sheets, I felt not triumph, not vindication, but a quiet sense of rightness, of things restored to their proper order. I didn't cry, not for Emily, not for the family that had briefly occupied these rooms, not even for myself and all I had endured. There would be time for tears later, perhaps. For now, there was only the profound relief of having finally spoken my truth, of having finally chosen myself. As I drifted towards sleep, I found myself thinking not of what I had lost, but of what I had found, a strength I hadn't known I possessed, a voice I hadn't known I could raise, a self I hadn't known was waiting to be reclaimed. In the darkness of what was now unquestionably my bedroom, I smiled, not because I was happy exactly, but because for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was free. 5 years have passed since that day. 5 years of seasons cycling through the Montana landscape outside my windows. Winter snows piling against the eaves, spring rains coaxing my garden to life, summer heat bringing the scent of pine through open windows, autumn painting the distant mountains in fire colors before the cycle begins again. The house has become truly mine in ways that transcend legal ownership. I've painted the walls in colors of my choosing, warm terracotta in the kitchen, soothing lavender in the bedroom, a soft sage that remains in the living room because I found I liked it after all. The leather sectional was donated long ago, replaced with comfortable pieces that welcome rather than impress. My nursing textbooks line bookshelves built by a local craftsman. Wind chimes hang from the porch, singing with every breeze. The service room where I once slept has been transformed into a sewing studio. The narrow window has been replaced with a larger one that frames the mountains, and shelves hold colorful spools of thread and stacks of fabric. Here, I create quilts, Some I keep. Some I sell at the local farmer's market. Some I donate to the hospital where I occasionally volunteer. The rhythm of needle and thread has become a meditation, a way of piecing together not just cloth but my own story. I'm 72 now, my hair completely silver, my hands showing the beautiful map of veins that comes with age. But I stand straighter than I did 5 years ago, look people in the eye more directly, speak with a voice that expects to be heard. The woman who once folded herself into corners, who apologized for her existence, who gave until there was nothing left, she's gone. In her place is someone I'm still getting to know, still learning to appreciate. There are moments of loneliness, of course. Nights when the house feels too large, too quiet. Days when a beautiful sunset or an amusing encounter at the grocery store makes me reach for my phone, wanting to share the moment, only to hesitate over the contacts list, uncertain who would welcome such a casual intimacy. Emily and I speak occasionally. The first year was difficult. Strained phone calls punctuated by long silences, brief visits where we circled each other carefully, like wounded animals, unsure if the other still had teeth. Mark never comes with her. I've never asked if this is his choice or hers, and she's never volunteered the information. The baby, a boy they named James, is 4 now. He calls me grandma with the easy affection of a child who has been taught to use the term but doesn't quite understand the relationship behind it. He has Emily's eyes, Mark's chin, and a laugh that belongs entirely to himself. When he visits, which is rarely, I show him how to plant seeds in the garden or let him help me roll out pie dough in the kitchen. We are building our own connection, unencumbered by the past that shadows my relationship with his mother. Lily visits more often. Now a teenager with her father's height and her mother's stubborn streak, she stays with me for weeks each summer. We have a different kind of relationship than I had with Emily at her age, more honest, less fraught with expectations. She tells me about school, about the boy she has a crush on, about her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. I listen, offer advice when asked, and keep my opinions to myself when they're not. We've found a balance that eluded me and Emily for so long. The letters from Emily come sporadically, sometimes months apart, sometimes several in a single week. They arrive in pale blue envelopes, her handwriting instantly recognizable. She writes about mundane things mostly. James's first day of preschool, the vegetable garden she's trying to grow, a promotion at work. Between the lines, I read what she doesn't say, that she's still trying to understand what happened between us, still trying to reconcile the mother she thought she knew with the woman who reclaimed her house and her dignity in one decisive moment. In her most recent letter, she included a photograph. James and Lily standing in front of a small bungalow with a for sale sign in the yard, a sold sticker plastered diagonally across it. Our new place, she wrote on the back. Finally saved enough for the down payment, all on our own this time. The pride in those words made me smile, even as I recognized the gentle rebuke within them. She's still learning, still growing, as am I. I keep the photograph on my refrigerator, next to the calendar where I mark my volunteer days at the hospital, my book club meetings, my lunch dates with the small circle of friends I've cultivated. A life built piece by piece, day by day, in the aftermath of that pivotal moment 5 years ago. Sometimes new neighbors ask about my living situation. They look at this house, spacious, well-maintained, clearly designed for a family, and then at me, a solitary woman with silver hair. Don't you get lonely in that big house all by yourself? They'll ask, concern or curiosity coloring their voices. I always smile at the question, thinking of the irony they can't possibly understand. No, I tell them. I was far lonelier when I was surrounded by people who couldn't see me. They rarely know what to make of that answer, but it's the truth. The deepest loneliness I've ever known was sitting in a crowded room, invisible. Being alone is a circumstance. Being unseen was a wound. Last week, Emily called with news. Her voice was tentative, as it often is when we speak, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Hope, perhaps, or determination. Mark and I are separating, she said without preamble. It's been coming for a while. We've tried, but it's not working. I absorbed this information, careful not to react too quickly, too strongly. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I had never wished unhappiness on her. I'm okay, she replied, and I could hear in her voice that it was true. I've learned a lot these past few years, about standing on my own feet, about what I deserve. The echo of my own journey in her words didn't escape me. Yes, I said softly, that's important. A pause, and then, I was thinking, maybe I could come visit this weekend. Just me, not the kids. We could talk, really talk. The offer hung between us, fragile as a soap bubble. 5 years of careful distance, of healing separate wounds, of rebuilding individual lives. And now, this tentative bridge extended. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how true the words felt. So now I wait. The guest room is prepared, fresh flowers on the nightstand, clean towels in the bathroom, not the service room. Never again will anyone I love be relegated to that space. I've baked bread, brewed tea, opened windows to let in the crisp autumn air, small gestures of welcome, of possibility. I don't know what will happen when Emily arrives, whether we'll find our way back to each other, whether we'll be able to speak the truths we've held in our hearts all these years, whether forgiveness is possible for both of us. I only know that I'm ready to try, not as the mother who bent until she broke, but as the woman who found her strength in the breaking. Outside my window, the rose bushes I planted 5 years ago are thriving now, their blooms nodding in the gentle breeze. They've weathered harsh winters, spring floods, summer droughts. They've been cut back, regrown, flourished. Like me, they've put down roots in this place, deeper and stronger than I could have imagined on that day when I first held the keys to this house. Not knowing that they were also the keys to myself, I watched the driveway, waiting for Emily's car to appear. Whatever comes next, I am ready. Not because I have all the answers, but because I finally asked the right questions. Not because I am perfect, but because I am whole. And in that wholeness, there is room enough for everything. For solitude and connection, for boundaries and bridges, for the mother I was and the woman I've become. There is even room, perhaps, for forgiveness, for both of us. Sometimes the most profound acts of self-love require us to stand alone. My journey from the service room to reclaiming not just my house, but my dignity, wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering my own worth. After a lifetime of giving, I finally learned that my needs mattered too. What would you have done in my place? Would you have continued to shrink yourself to fit into spaces others deemed appropriate for you? Or would you have found the courage to speak your truth? The hardest lesson I learned at 67 was that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's erasure. My relationship with Emily will never be the same, but perhaps it's stronger now for being honest. We're both learning that real love exists in the space between giving and taking, in the delicate balance of seeing and being seen. The rose bushes I planted 5 years ago have deeper, stronger roots now, just like me. They've weathered harsh winters and summer droughts, been cut back and regrown. Sometimes the most beautiful blooms come after the deepest pruning. If my story resonated with you, remember that it's never too late to stand in your truth. Your worth isn't measured by how much you give or how silently you endure. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you found meaning in these words, please follow our channel for more stories that reflect the complicated beauty of human relationships. Like, share, and tell us in the comments, when was the moment you realized your own worth was non-negotiable?